let me ask you a question. What do you think that it takes to create an incredible, meaningful, threatening, entertaining supervillain in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition? Well, I believe it comes down to answering one question 3 times. In fact, as cheesy as it is, there is a silly little rhyme that will help you with this. It goes like this: to create a great big bad evil guy, you just gotta ask why? That's what we're going to be looking at in this episode. Welcome along. My name is James Lavers. I'm the creator of the Every Tenday campaign and podcast that you can check out at www.everytenday.com. It's mainly about D&D for kids, D&D for families. I got into Dungeons & Dragons back in 1987 through my brother, then got playing with my sisters, and then I got playing with my friends. And I now play with my children every 10 days. They don't live with me. I see them every 10 days. We play a game then, and hence the name of the campaign. You get it, right? So you can check that out, our podcast. We're, at time that I'm recording this, our very first episode here on YouTube. Hey, how you doing to all you Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition fans out there? And also some of the more classic editions. I have to say, I still hold a very deep place in my heart for 2nd edition and for the good classic red box. We've even got a few relics that you can see around the house here. Now, what I really want to talk about is that when I started playing with my children in the beginning of 2019, my son was 10 years old, same age I was when I started playing. My daughter at the time was 13. We're just coming up on our very first full year of our very first campaign. And you know, one of the things when we started the game that I really lost the most amount of sleep over was, who's the bad guy? Like, who's the bad, or girl, right? Or bad guy or girl, right? Like, how do I do that? And how do I not make them so X-rated, so, as we call it in the UK here, 18? That's how we rank our films. It's PG, 15, 18. So we have very specific ages to go with it. But how do I create a bad guy that isn't going to terrify my children from ever wanting to play this game again, but will still be convincing, will still be frightening, where even when they're not there, right? Because as part of my campaign design, I was like, do you know what? I don't think my big bad evil guy is going to show up for quite a while. They're mainly going to be behind the scenes, like a puppeteer with strings, just controlling things. And it was where I put probably the most amount of work, other than mapping, was actually in who's our main villain. Our main villain is an Ulatharid, an undead, gigantic mind flayer. And I like mind flayers because psionics features very heavily in my campaign. It did when I was a kid. And I always liked the idea that psionics was something a little bit different from typical wizardry, typical magic. So I wanted our bad guy to probably have both, like have some wizardry powers, have some magic use, and have some psionics. So that's why I picked an Ulatharid. And is undead. So he's a lich, as well as being like the biggest, baddest ass mind flayer you could possibly get. So I thought, okay, when it comes to race and, you know, like their just general makeup, that's spooky. And also going back to, you know, things like Cthulhu, Necronomicon, you know, these kind of things, I always liked the idea, the spookiness of a mind flayer. They are a race which, the minute you start to describe them, humanoid but with an octopus-like head, you don't have to say much before people go, ugh. And the great thing is you don't have to describe much for kids to be freaked out just enough by a mind flayer. So I thought, gotta go for that as our main villain. But then I was like, why? Why is he bad? And this is where I started to answer those 3 questions. Why? If you want to create a great big bad evil guy, you've got to ask why? And it's not just because a lot of people, what they do is when they create a bad guy, they just ask why once. Like, why are they a bad guy? Well, la-di-da. Here's their motivation. But what I want to figure out is what's the motivation behind that motivation? And what's the motivation behind that? Now, if you can do that, what you could tend to find is the reason, the real reason. I don't want my my supervillains to be necessarily sympathetic, although it's been wonderful watching, you know, films like Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and seeing them really craft Thanos as this almost sympathetic bad guy, like terrible person doing a terrible thing, but he's doing it for apparently altruistic reasons. Go figure, right? So I wanted to sort of really look at that more. Also because of the age of my kids. Like I said, my son's 11, my daughter's 14 now. Charlotte, who plays Danaea, who is the paladin, Azamar paladin with the sword in the air that you can see on the screen behind me. And my kids are of that age where they're starting to see that the world isn't just good or bad now. It's not just like that. You know, it's not just, you know, no bad people and good people. Like it's more complicated than that. The world is more complicated than that, and I wanted my villains to be a little bit more complicated than that. They're just evil because they are, and you've got to stop them at whatever the cost. I wanted to start to look at what does make somebody bad, what does make somebody good, and so I had to ask why 3 times. So what I did with my villain was, well, what is he doing? What is the main thing he's doing? The main thing that my supervillain, whose name is a very long Mind Flayer name, but it's shortened to Luthor. I like Luthor. I like the BBC series about the detective Luthor. I like Lex Luthor. I just like the name. I think it's a brilliant villain's name, so I thought, yeah, I'll have that, thanks. But it's actually a shortened aspect of a much longer Mind Flayer name that I can't pronounce right now, but it's in my notes. And whenever my kids, need the name in the game, I have to be like, subtly look it up. Ah, yes, it's something Lankachek or something, it's a ridiculous long name. So what is he doing? He's actually corrupting. So he's behind the scenes and he's corrupting the good. Now that doesn't mean killing the good. In fact, he's not responsible directly for that many deaths in actual fact. What he is responsible for a lot of is corrupting, turning those who seem unturnable, actually twisting and making bad people that you would assume to be good. And in fact, Luthor takes delight in corrupting those who seem to be incorruptible, those who seem to be beacons of hope, beacons of good. What Luthor takes great logical delight in is corrupting those. And so that's his why. That's what he's doing, right? His reason for being is to corrupt the good. Now, he doesn't see it that way, and we'll get to that. So that's the first why. Now, why is he doing that? This is the second why. Why is he doing that? Well, the short answer is he wants to become a god. He believes very, very strongly from a logical standpoint, having looked into so many minds, having scoured the intellects of so many creatures over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, what he believes is, hang on a second, there is this evil within everybody. What he really wants to do is to free the world. And he feels that by showing people that everybody is corrupt, everybody is corrupt of heart, corrupt of mind, and that this is a natural state for most of the races upon the planet, he believes that by doing that, he's actually doing a righteous thing. And it's part of the reason he chose undeath, because he realized that to do such a task would take way, way longer than the 100 or so years that he would have as a Mind Flayer, as just an illithid. And slowly in the background, Luthor has been looking to corrupt, especially those who seem to be incorruptible, who seem to be solely good, who seem, especially, they are his favorite, those who seem to almost self-righteously talk of goodness in such a way. Luthor wants to corrupt those people, and he wants to do so because he thinks those people who talk only of good and being good and goodly acts and all these kind of things, he sees them as betrayers. He sees them as liars. He sees the whole idea of goodliness as a soul purpose. He sees it as a complete deception by the civilized races that do that. And so where he started his work was with the elves, with the haughty, slightly superior elves, who believed they were uniting with the dwarves for all these good reasons. And yet what Luther did was he corrupted them. He actually brought out their darker thoughts, the things they daren't even normally say, and he turned them against the dwarves, and hell ensued hundreds and hundreds of years before. Now, he, and this is where we join my kids' campaign, he is mainly has his sights set on a small kingdom called Kurth. And in Kurth there is an elderly king who had two sons. His eldest son, the one who was next in line to inherit the crown, was a sickly child, slightly deformed and mentally unsound and unhealthy in that sense. His second and youngest son was fit and strong and perfect in every way. And what the king chose to do when his sons were but children was to ostracize his eldest, to send him off in secret, to live in secret, so that he might never inherit the throne and might never inherit the crown. And he did that for what he thought were the right reasons, that the people should have a strong, powerful, healthy future king. And so the secret was kept, and the king was perceived to have only had one son, the prince, Ereborn Kurthson, who rules this small principality. And the king gave him this principality so that he could develop his leadership roles, he could develop his kingly duties, and see how well he could govern and run a domain. Well, Luther discovered this lie, which the king never set out to lie to his people, but deceive them he absolutely did. And Luther is now setting out to corrupt those people at the top, the princes, both princes, to corrupt them, to set them against them, so that the truth may out. Because don't forget, Luther believes that corruption is a natural state for most civilized races, and he wants anybody who is looking to hide, to obfuscate, to kind of keep from others the truth. He wants to bring that out. Now, we would call that corruption. He does that through corrupting people, through having them out themselves, out their darker sides, letting their darker sides run riot as well. We would call that bad. We would call that corruption. Luther doesn't see it that way. He sees it as a just cause. And that is the third why. So what is he doing? He's corrupting the goodly races. That's bad. We should be killed for that. Why is he doing that? Because he wants to become the god of corruption. That's bad. That's evil. Why would he want to do that? Because he thinks corruption is the natural state. Now we can go another why, right? And remember, the more whys you go down the line when designing your big bad evil guy, the more life it will bring on. That adds flavor to your campaign. That adds color. That adds a diversity. It also adds a complexity to your campaign, more than if you just have somebody who's evil. Why? Because they're doing something evil. Well, Luther is doing something seemingly evil, but doing it for what he sees as very just reasons, for a very just cause. And the minute you can get to that by asking why a number of times, usually it only takes 3 times, right? But by the 3rd or 4th time, you'll arrive at something that for the bad guy, for the villain, for your villain, feels okay. It feels right. It feels just. And I think with your villains that you're designing, you need to get to a place where you could almost have a sympathetic response to their reasons why. Their ultimate reason why they're doing what they're doing. Luther believes that most of the mess in the world is because of civilized races that see themselves as good, denying, defying, deceiving themselves about their darker sides, about their darker natures, and trying to either deny that they have it or ignore it or act in spite of it and all these kind of things. And Luther sees it as his role in the world to show this to the world. The way he's doing that is diabolical. That is probably why, in the end, who knows what will happen, but it is why our players are pursuing him. What will happen if we get to a place where our players are fully exposed to all of these whys? Well, that's when you get great gaming, great role-playing. When you get a session where you finish it and you go, oh, wow, that was like the best session ever. And I can't wait. I hope you enjoyed this episode, this first one. I'm going to be doing all these videos kind of live and uncut, as if you and I are just having a chat here in my living room. If you want to catch our Every Tenday podcast, go to everytenday.com. It's a podcast that we host on Anchor. You can get it on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere where you can get podcasts from. We're going to be adding a lot more videos in the future, including campaign diaries. We're going to be looking at our player characters. We're going to be looking at certain rule dynamics and things like that. I'm so pleased that we have this incredible community now of people like us who love to share our ideas, our thoughts, and what we've got going on. I can't always promise that these videos will be polished and slickly edited with music and flashbang and special effects and all those kind of things, but I will be sharing honest stuff that comes out of playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for over 32 years now, as both a player and mainly as a DM. I'll be sharing with you some of the frustrations, some of the problems that I run into DMing for children, DMing for kids, and how you, if you're somebody who's closer to my age, maybe you've got kids of your own, and you really want to get your kids playing D&D, and you want to DM for them, you want to be the dungeon master, I'll be sharing some ways in which you could do that and make it something that's enjoyable for your children. If you're somebody who only plays with your friends, well, hopefully you'll get some great tips here on how to DM better. And obviously, if you've got tips and advice that you see from listening to our podcast and, you know, really immersing yourself in our campaign, I'd love to hear them. We're a new channel. Our podcast's only a year old, and what we realize is this only works because of you, those of you who are watching this now, who listen to our podcast. So, big love to you, keep playing, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next video.